Thank you. You're very kind. I've heard our bishop say, thank you for the introduction, and God forgive me for believing it and enjoying it so much. I was going to start out by saying my name is Darrell Cates. I'm a recovering district superintendent. I've lapsed and relapsed twice, as Adrian said. But one of the things that being a district superintendent has taught me, besides attending lots of meetings, getting in the car and driving 2 hours to go to morning worship, dealing with conflict that you didn't cause, probably don't have the ability to solve, but you get to go back and fill out the report on it anyway. What it done is it makes me enjoy being at the Oklahoma United Methodist Foundation a whole lot more. If I'd known it was going to be that much fun, I would sure ask the bishop to send me there sooner. But the one thing it convinced me of is that our United Methodist churches need to be missional churches. So many of our churches are merely maintenance-oriented. We are depending upon a model that, if it did work, it doesn't work anymore, a model of attraction. We open the doors, we offer programs, people know we're here at 10:45 or 11 o'clock, hopefully they'll show up. And somehow, if they show up, God will magically do whatever only God can do and make them disciples, because we really don't have a plan or know how we're going to do that. What our culture is telling us more and more is they don't care. Whatever it was that attracted previous generations is not working anymore. And that the enterprise of being disciples of Jesus Christ and being the church today is a missional enterprise. And the good news is that we serve a missional God. A God who has always taken the initiative. A God who has always gone before us. A God who sends. A God who loved the world so much that he sent his Son into the world. It's a privilege to be invited to speak from this pulpit at New Covenant, because New Covenant has discovered through a journey of its life the difference between being a maintenance church and a missional church. Now, New Covenants, like most churches, they used to do missions as projects. And we needed to offer more programming, so some of them had to be missional. We would give food, we would do little things, but it was always an assignment, a project, a program. It was never at the core. It never guided the theology and the missional enterprise of this congregation. But at some point, New Covenant turned a corner. At some point, being a missional church and being involved in God's mission became the core of what this church is about. And if you've been here every Sunday, day in and day out over the years, you probably haven't even noticed a change. But God gave us the wonderful privilege of coming here a little over a year ago and seeing what God is doing. And what an amazing church this is. It guides your hiring. It guides your policy making. It undergirds in the significant strategic decisions that this congregation does. I'm reminded of the young lady that came in and was talking to her mom, and she said, "Mom, I've been thinking about who I might marry, and I want to marry a man just like Dad." It's not Father's Day, but feel good then. To which her mother replied, "It's taken me 35 years to shape up your dad into the kind of man he is today. His kind doesn't come in a 22-year-old model." It's taken God a while to shape up New Covenant into the kind of missional, life-changing, transforming community of faith that it is. But I want you to know what an amazing privilege you have of being part of what God is doing here. As a district superintendent, I would attend many churches that they had forgotten the reason they were created and came into existence. And what that meant was they had lost the connection to the mission field. They thought their job was just to take care of the members, to do all the things you do for members, marry, bury, baptize, but they had forgotten the connection. The mission field defines the mission. So many times we ask our congregations, what do you want to do? You've done those surveys, haven't you? And what you get back is, we want to do what we've always done. Whether it produces the results we need or not. We're tired. We've done all the church business, so we want to do the least possible that cost us the least time, the least money, the least resources. What we forget to do is to strategically, systematically listen to the field in which God has placed us, because they are the ones that are telling us the gap, the distance between them and God. The amazing thing about mission is that there's no place we can go that God hasn't gone already. That was also the wonderful learning experience for me as we started doing volunteers in mission seriously. Larry Acton, who founded Oklahoma VIM, did it on a very theological and strategic position, more than just being a travel agent for people to go on missions. He wanted us to know that God was already present in the culture where we were going. Oh, I forgot one definition, an important definition. Mission differs from ministry in this way. Ministry is carrying the good news from one person to another, regardless of the project or way you do it. That's ministry. It's a straight across, me to you, sharing the love of Christ in ways that make a Christian difference. Mission differs from ministry in that it's carrying the gospel, carrying the good news across a cultural barrier. That sounds ominous, doesn't it? Think with me, what makes up culture? Culture is all the memories and experiences we share as people. Culture is ultimately defined by language. Language has all kinds of meaning and purpose, and ministry, memories, and historical belonging and relationships. So one of the definitions of missions, when we go to a place that speaks a different language. In our day and time, you don't have to go very far. You just have to find out where your grandchildren are. They speak a different language. It's a language in symbols. It's a language in emojis. It's a language that has no syntax or punctuation. It's a language that has its own set of meanings and defines relationships. And I'm not putting it down. It's important. I just don't speak that language. That's why I'm not a missionary to you. I sent my son to be a missionary to you. Actually, I'm taking too much credit. Bonnie sent our son to be a missionary. And he struggles every day with translation. Translation into the symbols, the words, the experiences that help carry the message of Jesus' love to people that don't speak our traditional language. Mission is that challenge, to know that God is already there, that God is calling us, and the amazing thing is that God is already there, that it relieves us of some of the responsibility. The challenge for us is to go humbly with open hearts, minds, and spirits to learn what people in that community already know. To learn where God is active, learn where God is transforming lives. And part of my experience in doing mission and being involved in mission over the 40-some-odd years of my life in every church that I've served is to find that God's already there. And every time I come back from, no matter how far away it is, the amazing thing is the witness of the believers in that place in terms of their experience of God's and becoming disciples of Jesus Christ. And what they've learned about being content, what they've learned about trusting God, what they've learned about translating the love of God to those around them. And that's something we need to discover. This scripture verse is something of a theme for my whole ministry. On that first Easter evening, when people are locked up in the church, and if that's not a definition of most Methodist churches today, we are locked in God's house. And the only question we have when somebody comes in is, who are you and why are you here? That's not the definition of generous hospitality. I can't tell you how many times Bonnie and I were asked that question as I served in first the Woodward and then the McAllister district. Because not everybody recognizes a DS. We do look almost human from time to time. We had people shy away from us. They had a meet and greet time, and in western Oklahoma and southeast Oklahoma, the greeting time is longer than the sermon. Not that we actually greet anybody we don't know. We just wander around talking to people that we have talked to all week. It's kind of a family reunion. Bonnie and I walked into one church, and they had the meet and greet time, and they all went to one side. And we moved toward them, and they moved further away. They finally sent a scout. A 10-year-old girl, the granddaughter, was there, and they sent her over to say, who are you? And why are you here? I said, I'm the DS. She didn't know what that was, but she went back and told them. So finally, after the service, somebody came over and said, if we'd known you were anybody important, we'd have welcomed you. Which makes you wonder, what did they do to other people the rest of the time? The mission of the church is to let Jesus in. Because when we let Jesus in, he sends us out. Now, Jesus also probably thought this was a sermon on stewardship and money, and that's what you're afraid of. So he had to say, peace be with you twice to calm them down. Because anytime you talk about money and stewardship in the church, you need to pray to God. So Jesus entered the room and said, peace be with you. He showed them his hands and side. He identified himself, and they recognized him, and he repeated it. Peace be unto you. He breathed on them, offering them everything that God had given him. And then the Great Commission. As God has sent me, I send you. And it wasn't just for those gathered in the upper room. It was for every believer and follower of Jesus Christ ever since. Because God's mission hasn't changed. God is still sending those who would believe and trust in him out into the world. Out into communities that do not know and have not fully experienced the presence and power, the redemptive reign of the living God. Most churches start somewhere by doing projects, but I think one of the things that I saw really move churches to a different level was when they started doing volunteers and mission. When they started taking seriously that volunteer and mission wasn't just a project, it was prayerfully asking, how do we share the love of God and Jesus Christ in ways that truly do make a difference? One of the important distinctions in VIM asked was the difference between task and purpose. North Americans are very task-oriented. We're on a timeline for everything. We punch a clock. We want to go and accomplish the task. We want to get that house built in record time and prove that our casita is better than anybody else's casita. So we want to keep adding stuff to it and doing more. But VIM always has a time of reflection, or the best teams do, when we ask and say, where did we see God today? Where did God show up? Where did we share the love of Christ in a way that made a difference? Not just in putting bricks on the ground, but sharing a relationship that showed our concern. Once we started doing that, the crux became, how do we pay for it? Because there's never been a Methodist church that I've found yet that has too much money. Why do we need finance committees if for no other reason than to tell us there's not enough money? Oh, wait a second. They're supposed to help us understand stewardship. Oh, no, that's another story. Faith Promise came in at a time to reconnect not only our churches to community, but to reconnect us to God. Because mission is rediscovering that God is an awesome, powerful, and present God. That God does have a plan and purpose, and we've pretty much put God over in a little box so that we've forgotten that. We start depending upon our resources, our time, our effort, our energy, and we forget God's provision, God's resources, God's energy. Faith Promise was something I was introduced to when I was in high school. I didn't know any different. And I went straight to a seminary where the local community church at one time had 1 out of every 5 missionaries in the Methodist church in the world was assigned from that church. We would go to breakfast on Saturday morning, and there would be missionaries from all over the world telling us amazing stories of transformation, how God had helped them fall in love with a people that they didn't even know existed before. My first Faith Promise I made as a junior in high school. I didn't have a whole lot of faith. I didn't really trust God would give me anything more than I had, so my part of Faith Promise was to reduce my standard of living, and then I would give the surplus to God. So what I chose to give up was a Dr. Pepper a week, and that I would take that quarter and I would give it to God as my Faith Promise. So that worked out to $1 a month, so my Faith Promise was $12. I know that's not 52 weeks a year, but that was my math in high school, okay? So that was my first Faith Promise, and doing without Dr. Pepper didn't really do me great harm. Bonnie and I have continued to tithe and to make faith promises throughout our ministry. It's just something we feel God has led us to do, and we feel like it's made a difference in every church we've served because the churches, or at least the people that took part in Faith Promise, had a vital experience of God they never would have had otherwise. Seminary, as I said, we didn't have a whole lot left over at the end of the month in seminary, but we still tithed and made a Faith Promise. Every church I've served, I've tried to introduce Faith Promise to those congregations. Some, it was already there before I got there, like Ardmore, and the amazing history of that church and the stories that they have of mission experiences is absolutely astounding. Prior to that, the last church I served was St. Mark's over in Bethany. And I got to St. Mark's, and every inquiry I made about what we might do or what we needed to do was met with this litany. Preacher, we can't do that. We're in debt. It didn't matter what you said. The sun is up. Preacher, we can't do that. We're in debt. And finally, I got tired of hearing that by the end of the summer, and I went to the Bible written by Lyle Schaller in one of his 76,000 books written on ministry. In one chapter, he talked about Miracle Sunday. And you pray and you set a date and you ask your people to pray and to bring on that day the biggest offering that they've ever given to God to get the church out of debt. Well, we did it. We set the date. We prayed for our Miracle Sunday. And that Sunday morning, St. Mark's received the largest offering it had received at that time, $115,000 in a church of about 200 people, 200 in worship. And I stood back at the church and I was just blown away. That's amazing. And then I had several people walk up to me whose ministry and gift of the Spirit was to keep the preacher humble, who said, I thought God was going to give us a miracle. Where's the rest of the money? And I said, you guys just don't realize from $0 to $115,000 for the debt, that's a miracle. But I didn't know then that the finance committee doesn't always tell the church everything that they know. Because that $160,000 debt was in church bonds, and the finance committee had to keep 1 year's payment on those bonds in escrow. So the church had stashed away $45,000. Now, I'm a preacher. My math is not that great, but $115,000 and $45,000 is $160,000. So on that Miracle Sunday, basically, God got us out of debt. And so I would go to the next finance committee, what about this ministry project? What that God might lead us into? And they would say, we can't do that. We're not in debt. One of the leaders said, Darrell, what are you going to do now that we don't have debt? And I had, everybody knows that trust is the currency of ministry, right? If you don't know that, believe me, it's true. If people don't trust you, you can't do ministry. So what getting out of debt did was earn me that much trust with the council at St. Mark's. And I said, what I'd like to do is have a mission conference and introduce the church to Faith Promise next spring. And they all looked at me and said, we can't do that. We're out of debt. So, okay, preacher, go ahead and do what you want to do. But it was almost unanimous, but it won't work. Well, the next spring we had Faith Promise. I asked Larry Acton, who had started VIM, to come and be our speaker. And there was one guy who, his litany was almost every Sunday, hi, Darrell, it won't work. He sat in the choir. He had one of these stained glass baritone voices that every preacher wished they had. And he would sit back and you could almost hear him. It won't work. Well, Faith Promise came Sunday. Larry preached a sermon on Faith Promise, and he handed out the cards that you all have. These are not a pledge card. The stewardship committee, the finance council will not be coming to your door at any time wearing raincoats and looking like spies and saying, where's your faith promise? Because it's between you and God. Well, Bill's sitting back in the back row of the choir with the baritones, arms crossed like this, and I'm watching him because I'm out in front of the congregation for a change. And Larry says, the beginning is to pray. What, God, would you want to do through me? Well, Bill apparently did. And he wrote down on this card, and I wouldn't know it if he hadn't told me, $318 and it seems like 26 cents. And then he forgot all about it. Until later that fall, a buddy of his, fraternity brother, asked him if he would come and do a voiceover project for him. Bill never thought to ask, am I getting any money out of this? He was just doing a favor for a friend. He went down, did the voiceover, went on about his business. But a couple of weeks later, he came into my office and he showed me a check. $318.26. It was exact to the penny what he had written down. Bill had a way with things. He went to the nominations committee and he was appointed as chairman of the mission group the next year. And he made sure we had a mission conference and a faith promise, and we've had one. They had one at St. Mark's ever since, while he was still there. Bill loved mission so much, he took out a life insurance policy. He still pays on it to this day, and he made Volunteers in Mission the beneficiary of his life insurance policy. Bill was also, he was a colonel in the reserve, so he had been to command school, and he had that kind of voice. So when Bill talked about missions, people felt like it was God commanding them himself. And one Faith Promise weekend, Bill kind of nudged me out of the way and got into the pulpit and said, "Preacher, God's been telling me that whatever y'all prayed and put down on the card, you need to double it." And I heard this audible gasp from the front of the church, and it was my wife. Now, God tells my wife things before he tells me. Matter of fact, she woke me up this morning and told her God told her we need to give 50% more this year than we did last year. So I'm praying about that. But she was in the early service, probably a done deal. But we were at a time in our life where our son was about to start college, and we knew tuition was going to be added, and we already tithe. Faith Promise is above and beyond. So, and she felt like God spoke when Bill got up there, so she doubled it. And we had no clue where it was going to come from. Well, we'd been given some stock in the family, and it had really underperformed the whole time we had it. I don't know what happened that particular year, but they split the stock. It paid a record dividend, and it was our faith promise and a building pledge that we had made on a project. God provided, and we knew that it was God. Faith promise increases your faith in God if you will trust him. There's some more things to say, but I need to give you time to pray. To pray. To ask God, God, what would you like to do through me? I will trust you to provide. Or I will trust you, Lord, to show me how to make more. And rather than increase my standard of living, I will honor you by giving the surplus. Or God, I've been praying about simplifying my life, and there are some things I'm doing and spending money on now that I really don't need to. But rather than just stashing those funds away, I'll believe that surplus is from you as well. And I will be a channel, conduit into mission. Your mission, Lord. Not to a program, not to a project, but to make the love of Christ known across whatever cultural barrier comes our way.